There's a little bit of that. We're going to pilot that program. So.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the regular Board of Education meeting for today, Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. And as usual, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I skipped something I should have done first before we roll into the recognition for Theodore Roosevelt Elementary. I would like to have a brief moment of silence in honor of John J.R. Goddard, Jay Hershowitz, and Quamir Lucas. A couple of things I'll read and then we'll have a moment of silence. Binghamton firefighter John J.R. Goddard died in the line of duty while battling a fire February 12, 2025. J.R. was an alumnus, a parent of students at Thomas Jefferson and Horace Mann, and a dedicated coach to many other students who have played and are playing youth sports in Binghamton. He exemplified patriot pride. As we honor his memory, we remember the countless ways he served the school and the Binghamton community. Our thoughts are with JR's wife and children at this time, the two other firefighters who were injured, as well as the entire Binghamton Fire Department and their families during this difficult time. As always, we appreciate your strength and support for each other and for our students. Jay Hershowitz was a school board member of ours from 1988 to 1993, and he had passed away peacefully February 12, 2025. Jay was born and raised on the east side of the city and was a graduate of Binghamton North High School. And Quamir Lucas was an 8th grade student at East Middle School. He was a wonderful young man who will be deeply missed here in the city school district and fondly remembered by classmates as well as by our faculty and staff. At this time, I'd like to have a brief moment of silence in honor and memory of these three individuals who sadly are no longer part of our community here. Thank you. At this time, we will welcome Christy Sloma, and this month's recognition is Roosevelt Elementary. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to share with you this evening how we're responding to diverse needs at Roosevelt. So this year we've taken a strong focus on our attendance, and last month Meg McGarry shared some attendance information with the board, and this month I'd like to share with you some of the work that we're doing at Roosevelt around attendance. Last year in March we piloted a Tier 2 attendance challenge with about 30 students, and it worked out very well, and we decided to grow that as well as make some changes from what we learned last year to make it even better this year. We're targeting students in grades 3 through 5. This year we have 84 students that are participating in this, and we targeted students who at the end of last year fell in the attendance range of 80% to 94% for their average daily attendance. What we're doing is we're trying to have students compete against just themselves, trying to meet or beat their attendance from the previous month, and we're using extrinsic motivation for this year and hoping to turn that to intrinsic down the road. The impact so far this year is from last year to September, 54% of the students, of those 84 students, have improved their attendance. Looking from September through November, 65% have improved. November to December, 51%. In December to January, we saw our greatest progress with 85% of students improving their attendance rate from month to month. Now, this relates back to our SEP goal for attendance, where we want students to improve their average. We want to increase our average daily attendance by 3%. Right now, we've increased it by 1.1%, so we're on the right track. We're moving in the right direction. The tiers of attendance intervention that we're using, this Tier 2 attendance challenge that we're using, we start at the top with our Tier 1, universal for all students. It's our classroom attendance challenge, where classes earn a letter by having perfect attendance. Once they spell perfect attendance, then they have a party for that class. Then we move down into our Tier 2, and we have kind of two Tier 2 spots. It's the stay in the green. That is for our students who are already doing what they're here 95% of the time, so that's what we would like to see our students doing. So those students have this opportunity, more like an enrichment, where during each of our PBIS assembly months, so October, December, February, and April, they earn a certificate and a prize for staying in the green. Then we have for our intervention piece of the Tier 2, because Tier 2 always has enrichment and intervention, the intervention piece is this Tier 2 challenge, where we've invited those students who fell between 80% and 94% last year to be a part of this. At the beginning of the year, they all received an invitation. Families were mailed a letter explaining exactly the graphic that you see up there, what this attendance challenge is for, and how we're helping to support students with becoming independent, with coming to school, and motivating them to come to school in the morning. What these students can earn is, during each of those months that we have our PBIS assemblies, they will earn a certificate as well as up to 5 celebrations, as long as they're meeting or beating their attendance each month, because they're only competing against themselves. Then they can earn these celebrations. We've had our October and December celebration. Our February celebration will be this week on Friday. Students have loved coming down to the cafeteria. They're called over the announcements. They come downstairs. We have a treat and a drink for them. They sit together. They have great conversations. They're celebrated with a certificate that they get to take home and share with their families. Now, students who are in the Tier 2 challenge have access to everything above that. So they still have the stay in the green. They can still earn prizes and certificates for staying in the green. They're still a part of their classroom parties for the perfect attendance challenge. Then if we have students who aren't meeting the expectation of meeting or beating their attendance from month to month, then we have students who come into the Tier 3. This is where our CARES partnership with Binghamton University comes into play. What we do is I sit down with our CARES team. We go over the students who weren't responding to the intervention. They didn't meet or beat their attendance. And then the CARES team reaches out to have those conversations of what more can we do to support. We're trying to dig down to what is the root cause for students to not be responding to this level of intervention, so that we can identify trends and then build in practices that will help support families with common reasons as to why students' attendance isn't where we need to see it. This is in addition to the things listed below, where we're mailing out letters. Mr. Chilson mails out letters every summer to the 50 students who had the lowest attendance the previous year, just to explain the impact on academic performance and social emotional growth. Then at least twice a year during the year, we mail out letters for those who are below 90%. And then the Earn a Letter Challenge, students who are chronically absent have the opportunity to earn extra letters for their class for that perfect attendance party, so that they are more involved in what that perfect attendance challenge, and they're able to earn and help their class get those parties. Plus, our attendance clerk calls home just as they should every day, and the district sending out the letters when they miss 5, 10, 15, and 20 days of school. So our building-wide impact, as I shared, we're trying to improve our average daily attendance by 3% this year. This is just looking at our trends over the years. The different colors on the bar graphs represent the months, and this is organized by year. As you can see, in 2020, 2021, we didn't have any months where we were 90%. And when you fast forward to this year, we've not been below 90%. So we're trending in the right direction right now, and we're seeing success with the interventions that we have in place. Taking a look at our chronic absenteeism rates, so our goal this year is to reduce chronic absenteeism by 10%. This year is the first year that we have been below 40%. So we have improved by 3.6%. We obviously have more work to do. We want to try to hit that 10% decrease, but we are celebrating that we're now down into the 30s instead of the 40s and the 50s where we've been in years past. Another way that we're supporting diverse needs in our building is through our Tier 2 SEL groups, SEL being social emotional learning. Right now, these are based on teacher recommendations and the student support team recommendations. This is for students in grades K through 5, and it's for any students who need additional support beyond the Tier 1 connected and respected social emotional learning curriculum. All students are also included in this. This is part of our SET plan. If the student has five or more discipline referrals for the year, then we make sure that they are also in a Tier 2 group. And next year, we're going to be utilizing data from Panorama to inform groups. In years past, we had the social emotional screener called Co-Vitality. This year, we've moved forward with Panorama. So we will use that data to look for students who might be in the at-risk category for belonging in school, feeling safe and secure at school, so that we can make groups next year based on this year's data, so we can help get ahead and help support students right from the beginning of the year. So far this year, we have served 37 students in these Tier 2 SEL groups. Some students have participated in more than one. These groups run for about 8 to 10 weeks, and they focus on social skills, coping skills, self-control, and friendship skills. So it really helps to work on that belonging piece. We've had in K2 about 13 students, and 3 through 5 we're serving more students in the upper grades. We've also supported students through our student support team in locker room 345, which is our partnership with Dick's Sporting Goods. There's a list of who participates on our student support team. We currently have 24 active cases that are working on the areas of basic needs, behavior, and attendance. And we have 12 inactive cases where through the support of the student support team, they no longer needed that level of support. They're still in EduClimber, the platform that we manage student support team. So if we need to bring them back into an active case, we can at any point. But right now, those 12 students are showing great success. And the other 24 students, we are actively working on supporting them in those areas that I mentioned. For locker room 345, where we can place orders with Dick's Sporting Goods to receive clothing and outerwear for students as well as footwear, we've placed 167 orders so far this year to support students with basic needs. We've also included lunch and recess options. This was part of our shared leadership team worked on this plan. So for grades 2 through 5, we wanted to increase options for recess. So instead of only having an outdoor option or on inside days wherever they're assigned to go, we also have the library set up with games and art, and then the gym has structured activities in it. When students get ready to go to recess, they can choose which area they want to go in. And what this has done for our students' attendance is it's really helped them with their sense of belonging, because they're choosing places where they want to go with students who want to do the same things that they want to do. And we've seen that this is also helping impact our attendance goals. For lunch sessions, as another option for students, this focuses in the area of 1st through 5th grade. And what this looks like is it's additional one-on-one time with an adult or a small group with an adult. The people that they might work with are their check-in and check-out coach, one of our social emotional learning team members, or band and orchestra. And these are optional for students. We don't force students into these because this is outside of going outside the library, the gym. This is all when students want to have these opportunities, we're offering it to them. This is the impact that the additional options during recess are having. Looking at our discipline referrals over the last few years, we're down in the single digits this year for discipline referrals for playground, where in years past we've been close to 20. Looking ahead to next year, our Tier 2 attendance challenge, we're going to increase the number of students participating. We're going to widen our sweep and include 2nd grade in this next year. So our current 2nd through 4th graders will be in it. We're also going to look to dip into 2nd grade next year to see how it impacts our 2nd grade average daily attendance. And we're going to widen, instead of starting at 80%, we're going to drop it down to 70% to cast our net wider and support more students. We're going to also look at, when we're looking at November 1st, because we want to include students that are moving in, or maybe students who had a higher attendance rate last year, but then the following year they're having a struggle at the beginning of the year, we're going to look at 70 to 90% there. For our Tier 2 social emotional learning groups, they'll begin in October. We're going to continue with teacher recommendation, but we're going to look at our current 4th graders on that panorama assessment that I mentioned for students who are falling into at-risk categories. And then at the end of this year, any student with 5 or more disciplinary referrals would start right at the beginning of the year in our Tier 2 groups. And then our shared leadership team will continue to monitor and revise our lunch and recess options. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
I just had 2 questions. On one of the first slides, it showed there was a big improvement for December, January. What do you attribute that to? Or is there anything that was going on to make it?
December, January, and in the month of December, there's a lot of really fun activities going on, and that could be a draw for students to come. We had a lot of illnesses at the beginning of the year, and that kind of tapered off for December, January-ish. So other than this, students, it's been really exciting to see students respond to the Tier 2 attendance challenge. I've never had students come up to me and ask me what their attendance rate is and how it compares to the month before. And students, my office is on the 3rd floor. I'm with 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And I have some regular students that pop in just to check to see what their average daily attendance is and asking questions about, one student had to go out of town because of a family event, and that student wanted to know if that was going to have a negative impact on his attendance because it wasn't his choice to go. So we talked about what that looked like and that yes, it would have an impact on your attendance and what can we do when you get back to make sure that you have really good attendance so it doesn't impact celebrations. And we had that conversation and he made it to every celebration. He still met or beat all of his attendance rates and was included in everything. He's very aware of it.
When you said the committee or group working out was looking for common trends, have you found any common trends?
One of them right now is around cold weather. That when the weather is really cold and students have to walk, it's difficult for parents bringing their children to school, especially if they have younger children in strollers. So if the cold weather seems to be an obstacle for us right now, and we don't have a solution at the moment, but that's something that we're noticing and something that we're going to work with our CARES team and our student support team to see if there's anything that we can do to help and support families in those situations.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Christy, I know Roosevelt has done, for as long, if not longer than most of our buildings, the check in, check out. Can you just talk a little bit about the connection between that and the attendance as well? So the students are setting their goals, right? But what are some adult supports in the building?
Sure. So we have a list of adults in the building who are our check-in, check-out coaches. When students are identified for check-in, check-out, sometimes that is done by teacher recommendation through RTI, response to intervention, a student support team recommendation. Sometimes we have families calling in and saying that their child doesn't feel connected to the school, they don't have that safe person they can go to. So then we sit with the child and we ask them to look at, we talk about the list of coaches and students identify who their coach is, and then they check in the morning with that coach and out at the end of the day. Students work with their classroom teacher or whatever area of the day they happen to be struggling with to write goals that would help them improve whatever it is that they're struggling in. And then when throughout the day, their teacher tracks their progress towards that goal. Then at the end of the day, the coach takes a look at how they did. They've had the pep talk in the morning, they've reviewed the goals, they've talked about some strategies they can use with those goals. At the end of the day, the coach is there to help celebrate whatever happened, and if there's any areas where the student struggled, it's that opportunity to say, tomorrow's another day, what could we have done differently today, what are we going to bring into tomorrow, and it helps to connect students a sense of belonging at school, and they have that adult that they know that they can rely on. Throughout the day, sometimes if children are going through difficult times, they might ask if they can go and see their check-in, check-out coach, and we have passes where students can go, not necessarily the beginning or the end of the day, but other times during the day when they can go check in with their person. And then that's very meaningful to the student as well as the adult that they're working with. When we have new students to the building and they might not be familiar with everybody in the building, we try to connect them with a teacher in the next grade level so they can begin building relationships with that next grade. So when they move into that grade, they already have that sense of belonging with an adult in that grade level, or we connect them with special area or somebody from our social emotional learning team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for representing Roosevelt, and we wish Dave well.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the first of the two public comment portions of the meeting. Is there anyone that would like to speak before I go ahead and read the rules, and then if nobody wants to come up, I figure I'd flip it the other way around and ask if anybody what you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak. By law, we're not permitted to address any personnel or individual student matters here in the open session. If anything requires follow-up after the meeting, we can take it up with the board clerk, and I can provide the contact information. And let me just get my phone turned back on, get the timer, and please come up whenever you are ready.
Hello, everybody. My name is Allison Pardalis Johnson. My husband and I made a strategic decision to live on the west side and send our 2 kids to this district when we moved here into the area. Right now, I have several questions to ask the board moving forward. First and foremost, I'm coming from a school system in Baltimore County, Maryland, where I was a school social worker. She did amazing. I was also an administrator in a district that serves over 300 schools in all different demographics. As any school social worker would do, I have observed a lot since moving into this district. One of those observations is that we are at a clear crossroads in this city. There are at least 3 administrators that I know of who are retiring or have retired mid-year that have been absolute staples in this community. I fear that without solid replacements, our great teachers will also depart. My question to this group is, how are we supporting administrators right now, and how are we creating new and ready administrators to take over? I am fully aware that good teachers stay even in our most challenging districts when they believe they are being supported by strong leadership. When I hear about an administrator leaving mid-year, I'm quick to ask why. The social worker instincts continue to go up. So Mrs. Battolino does not strike me as someone to leave a building mid-year without a specific purpose. She was someone who was well respected by her staff, students, and community. I understand that rumors are rumors, but when I hear about a principal not being supported when they are making decisions based on the safety of others, I become concerned. So I ask again, how are we supporting principals with the extreme challenges they are facing to keep their school safe, supported, and well-staffed? I understand that there are different circumstances here that are challenges versus in a school like Vestal, but I still expect our higher-ups to support our principals with creating a safe space for our students. I also expect to hear about the plan that we as a district are putting into place to successfully transition our incredible retirees out and our incoming principals in. We're talking about 90+ years of experience, like with the 3 administrators, and these are big staples in our community. Is there a leadership program already implemented in our city that promotes the success of potential leaders in our system? How are we finding the correct replacements to lead these buildings towards success? These schools are unique in the sense that they are challenging, yet full of so much potential and amazement. We have to pick the right people to lead these schools. Our students' lives depend upon these decisions. Good teachers leave districts like ours if leadership is not strong. And I'm going to repeat that once more. Good teachers leave districts like ours if leadership is not strong. We have to replace these solid leaders with new leaders who are going to just be able to transition. Good teachers leaving equates to our children suffering, and it all begins with who we hire next. So my question to the board is, what is the plan? Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting, the first public comment portion, and move on to the next item, which is approval of minutes from the work session and regular meeting held January 28th, 2025. Could I have a motion to approve and accept the minutes? Moved by Albert, seconded by Shante. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Financial report for the month of January 2025 was circulated prior to the meeting. Are there any comments or questions on the financial report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to a presentation on the 5-year budget projection and update on our financial status with Cynthia Wombold and Jennifer Dove.
Good evening. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you for having me. Angela Rogers was here last month from the Central Business Office and gave you an overview of the executive proposal. We're going to take that a step further this month and take a look at your long-range projection. We try to do this once a year around this time of year. And so tonight we are going to be taking a look at this year's projected performance, taking a look at your status of your reserves and your total savings or fund balance for the general fund, looking at a long-range projection. Oops. So I'm going to start with what we're expecting for this year. So I do not want you to be alarmed with the big red number in the middle of the screen, okay? Let's start with the bottom number. So right now we are projecting this year to have an operating surplus of a little over $1 million. However, on your financial statements, it's going to show an operating loss of almost $23 million. And this is because of the transfer of $24 million for the Roosevelt Capital Project that the voters approved in December. So that money was in the capital reserve. We have to shift that as an expense in the general fund over to the capital fund. It's an accounting thing, and it's going to show on your financial statements and your audited financial statements at the end of the year a loss of possibly $23 million. However, we take that out when we're really looking at what the true picture is of what the operating performance is this year, and we are expecting to have a surplus of around $1 million. This absolutely could change, really dependent upon student needs, staffing levels for the rest of this year. I'm trying to find the sweet spot here. The factors that are contributing to this, a lot of this is on the revenue side. While we have received additional state aid, we've received additional foundation aid, a couple $100,000 there. We've received additional BOCES aid due to the additional enrichment spending and additional alternative placements you were able to do at the end of last year. A lot of this is driven by interest earnings. We've had significant interest earnings this year. We're expecting about $1.5 million of interest earnings, but please know that 1.2 of this is related to the reserves. So that interest has to go directly back into the reserves. It cannot be used for operations unless it's used for one of the reasons the reserves were established for. The majority of this is related to that capital reserve, and that's $24 million. So you're going to see your interest earnings tail off for the second half of the year because we've moved that $24 million out of the capital reserve over to the capital fund. No worries, we're earning interest on it in the capital fund until we spend it, and we'll reinvest that money in capital work. However, that 1.5 has helped giving you that surplus this year. So without that $1.5 million, you actually would have an operating loss of a little under $500,000. So about 1.2 is related to reserves of interest earnings, and 300,000 is related to regular operating cash. On the expenditure side, expenditures are about as expected, with the exception of that interfund transfer to capital of $24 million. When we take a look at what we're expecting your overall savings to be in the general fund at the end of this year, we are expecting them to be about $33.4 million. There's 5 different categories of fund balance. The first category is non-spendable fund balance, and this is prepaid expenditures. It's postage, really. And we have to set aside fund balance to pay for expenses that are really attributed to the next school year. We always have this. It's not a very, very big amount. Your restricted reserves is where we put most of your savings. We do expect to end the year at $23 million, and I'll go over this on the next slide. We do set aside some funds to help support next year's budget, and that would be $3.6 million right now in the budget plan. This is decreasing by $300,000. If you remember in last year's budget, in the 24-25 budget, I'm already into 25-26. So that's this year for me. The $300,000 we set aside was for the vehicles that were purchased. So we've taken that back out, and we're just at $3.6 million to support the budget. Encumbrances are purchase orders that are made typically towards the end of the school year, but then the items don't come in or they aren't fully paid for by the end of the close of the fiscal year. And so we carry those over into the next school year. You will absolutely 100% have encumbrances at the end of the school year. When we do the projections, we're including those in the expenses. So we zero them out here so that we're not double counting them. They'll probably be about the same, in the same general vicinity as last year. Then unassigned fund balance, that is the number that we talk about of being a 4% limit of next year's budget, and we do expect that to be pretty close to that 4% limit. That would be $6.2 million at the end of this year that is set aside in unassigned fund balance. That is the least restrictive area of your savings, and we would expect that to grow by about $275,000. So all in all, $33.4 million of total savings in the general fund set aside for various purposes at the end of the school year, changing by the amount of that operating loss. Here's a more detailed look at your reserves, and you do get a look at this in the summary that we provide in your treasurer's report, as well as what we're projecting there. A little bit more on that this year. You have 8 different reserves. They're all for very specific purposes. So you can't use the unemployment insurance reserve to pay for health insurance, for instance. It can only be used to pay for unemployment insurance. You have a little under $200,000 in that reserve, and it's growing this year by interest earnings. The next 2 reserves are your retirement contribution reserve to support the employee retirement system, and then a sub-reserve of that same reserve to support the teacher retirement system. The teacher retirement system is the third one on the list there, is limited by law to a certain amount, and so we would fund that potentially up to $100,000 this year to keep it right pretty much at the maximum that we could have in that reserve. The ERS reserve, we would potentially fund $500,000. That could potentially have around 6 years of support in that reserve if we look at what your past ERS expenses are. It's one of the most flexible reserves, and that's why we put money in there, because we can take money out to pay for ERS, and then that may help you pay for other things that you have to pay for instead. These are the 2 reserves that help support pension costs. While I'm saying what the potential funding of these reserves may be at the end of the year, that will absolutely be decided upon by the board at the end of the year. We would make a recommendation in June, but at this point in time, we put a placeholder in as we're going along. The Employee Benefit Accrued Liability Reserve has about $800,000 in it and supports time earned upon separation and would grow by interest earnings. The Tax Tertiary Reserve, when we took a look at this reserve several months ago, we believe that we may have to decrease this reserve legally by the amount, because of the amount of claims that you have right now, but that can change in any minute. So we'll be re-evaluating that in the spring before we come to you with a recommendation on reserves in June. And so, but right now we're putting a placeholder, we're decreasing that reserve about $225,000. Your capital reserve, after we use the reserve for the Roosevelt project, has about $2.4 million in that, and we'll continue to earn interest on that for the rest of the year. Your health insurance reserve is now almost your largest reserve, a second largest reserve, and that has about $6.4 million in it and would support future costs of health insurance. And your repair reserve has about $558,000 potentially at the end of this school year. So that's the sum of all of your reserves. Before I move on, is there any questions on either that or your fund balance?
Cynthia, I would just add, when we look at reserves, the comptroller's office expects us to use them. It's not kind of like our own personal savings account where you might want to save and save and save just in case there's a rainy day. And so when Cynthia says there may be recommendations to spend certain reserves over others, it may have to do, we may have to reach like our 5-year limit on one, and so we would want to start to spend one down and so on. So that will be explained to the board in terms of at the end of the year recommendations. But since we have some new board members, it looks like it's a great savings plan, and we were able to do that with the capital reserve, and we did that intentionally because we knew this need was coming up. But the others, they each have rules.
They do. And I think a great example of that is the Retirement Contribution Reserve Subfund for TRS. Just as an example, when the state finally allowed a reserve for TRS several years ago, they did put a limitation on that. You can only put up to 10% of teacher salaries into that reserve based on the last year of teacher salaries, and there's a limit of how much you can fund each year. So we would love to put more money into that reserve because that is a very big line item in your budget, and there would be more flexibility there, but we are limited by law to how much can go into that. So every year we try to take a look at your long-range projection, and it's really based on the best information that we have at the time of the long-range projection. And I've given long-range projections before, and then a month later something just like crazy happens, and they're, just throw them out and we're going to start again. So we try to look at long-range plans, and I always try to tell boards when I'm meeting with them, the long-range plans are meant to give you an indication of how quickly you need to react to your financial situation that's coming down the road. And it's different for every district. And so I'm going to go over that tonight. And I'm going to first start to talk about what are some of the assumptions in this particular long-range plan. So the first assumption is that foundation aid for next year would be 2.64%. I've recalculated foundation aid based on what the governor is proposing and your most current accurate data. And I estimate that we would increase foundation aid next year 2.64%. Without the governor's proposal, what she's proposing, it would be much closer to 0%, so a very nominal increase in foundation aid. What's going to happen after that? I have to be honest and say I have no idea. So foundation aid is, while it is supposed to be a predictable formula, it's very difficult to predict. So there's a lot of different factors, and one of the biggest factors is student enrollment. If the district's enrollment is increasing, you may be able to count on an increase in foundation aid, but if the district's enrollment is decreasing or remain flat, it's difficult sometimes to have an increase in foundation aid based on formula. There's other factors of the formula, including wealth factors, that would compare Binghamton City School District against the rest of the state. While I might be able to figure out Binghamton City School District's wealth factors, I don't have access to the rest of the state's wealth factors until they come out with the executive proposal, and so it makes it really difficult to tell what the impact of those would be. And then finally, I'd say that one of the biggest impacts of the foundation aid formula is politics. So a year ago, we stood here and said that the governor was going to cut foundation aid for over half the districts in the state. This year, she's done a 180-degree turn, and we're very thankful for that. And she is proposing a minimum increase of 2% for all districts. So that's a dramatic shift in the politics that have gone into this formula. There's been a lot of talk about the foundation aid formula and obviously the study that was done on it, and she is moving forward with some of the recommendations in that study. We're hopeful that additional recommendations will come forth with the legislative proposal and or future budget cycles. So what do we use for the outer years? Because she's projected a minimum increase of 2% this year, we're going to use 2% for the outer years. But know that it could be 0, or know that it could be more if all the factors, they all add up to be a very good year for you. The expenditure-driven state aid are projected to increase modestly, so this is like transportation aid and your BOCES aid, and that is because we're projecting the expenses that drive this aid to increase modestly as well. And then finally, we would assume that the district will go out at your tax levy limit that we estimate for the 5 years that we're showing. On the expenditure side, sometimes we show this projection based on the staffing levels of the current school year. Well, we've gone ahead and changed this to reflect what we expect the staffing levels to be for 25-26, because we do expect a significant change in those staffing levels for 25-26. So we've gone ahead and projected this so you could see truly what we're expecting for next year. We're including 7% for health insurance in all years. Again, a very highly volatile line, being that you're self-insured, but this is closer to industry trend. The teacher retirement system rates for next year are actually dropping just a little bit. They're going from 10.11 to 9.59, so we're including 9.59 in the projection. ERS is going up, and we will hold that at 14.05 for all years. This projection includes a 1-year increase for contract transportation. I just need to get my water a second. I apologize. I'm fighting a dry cough. It's like your worst nightmare. All right, so we have a 1-year increase in contract transportation costs of 25% for next year, and then they would increase modestly after that. Like I said earlier, many of the other costs, like BOCES, are projected to increase modestly. So here is that long-range plan. So I'm going to start at the top and walk you through this. The tax levy for next year is estimated to be 3.26% based on the tax levy limit calculation. We're going to have a lot more detail on that in the March presentation.
And just to add, so that it'll be presented to you in March, and then we'll have a definitive support for what the tax levy will be in April, so prior to adopting the actual budget for next year to go out to the public.
Thanks for the break, Tanya. Then in the outer years, right now, we're expecting the tax levy limit to calculate at 2, 1.85, and 1.85. This could obviously change based on the factors that go into the formula, but based on the information that we know now, that's what we would expect. Foundation aid I've talked about. And then the next line down is your beginning fund balance. This is that savings we reviewed. So it's obviously dropping significantly from 24 to 25, 26. So we'd start the 25-26 year with $33.4 million of fund balance. We're then projecting revenues to be $151 million for next year versus expenditures of about the same, just a little bit less. This would provide an operating surplus next year of $735,000. However, that $735,000 is really related to reserve interest earnings. So we added a line this year to show you what the true operating surplus without the reserve interest earnings are. It didn't matter when we didn't earn any interest on reserves, but it makes a difference now. And we're showing us pretty much at break even for next year. This is after significant changes in staffing levels. So if we didn't include that, then this operating deficit would be significantly greater. But because of changes that you made last year, changes that you'll make next year, that sets you up for less expected reductions in 26-27. So if you look at the second line from the bottom in 26-27, if we roll all these assumptions forward, we're still expecting an operating loss of $3 million in 26-27. And so unfortunately, unless revenues change, the district would have to continue to make reductions. It's awful, but would have to continue to make reductions in these outer years. That would, if you make reductions in 26-27, that's going to drop the 27-28 number you'd have to reduce. So if you made reductions in 26-27 of $3 million, then you're only looking at $4 million in 27-28. So every year you make changes, it improves the future. Unfortunately, that's the time that we're in. And when I started this presentation, I talked about how fast you have to react. You're in that immediate react zone. So every position that you have through attrition has to be evaluated, and you're doing that. You're doing those smart things right now. Unfortunately, that's what has to happen. Just revenues do not keep up with the expenses. You know, you're looking at 4 to 5% average increases in expenses and 2% increases in revenues. Anyone can do that math. It just doesn't work. You can operate with a slight deficit and then use your reserves to offset that. However, you have to be careful. You have limited reserves. So you have to be very strategic in the use of those reserves. And that's something we'll look at as the years continue. Many districts in the region are going through this, and you will not be alone in what you're facing. I do want to note that for 25-26, when we show you the first draft of the budget always looks a little worse. Because we're assuming that you are going to have everybody working for the entire year. And then the reality is that you're going to have some positions that are open. You're going to have some teacher aides that you're waiting to fill, for instance. And you also have some special education placements that we're really hoping you're able to place, but due to a shortage of placements in the region, you may not be able to. So we will likely have some savings. And so when we put together the budget, we're going to assume that you're going to be able to do those things. However, that will drive the deficit up in the budget. So the budget's going to look worse. So what we'll probably recommend is that we budget for some use of reserves, not nearly at the level that we did last year. But then we expect probably realistically not to actually have to use the reserves in reality in 25, 26. Again, it's going to be highly dependent on health insurance and student needs.
So Cynthia, I'm just going to add to that a little bit. So next month, you'll hear from Jennifer and I in terms of the adjustments that we made, why we made them, when we made them, to be able for Cynthia to make that statement. But I also wanted to bring to the board's attention the unknown at the federal government level. If the federal government eliminates the Department of Education or funding that flows from the federal government, particular our title funding, it will be devastating. It's about $8 million, largely supporting our interventionists within the school district. So if that were to be, if that were to happen, it's going to be a lot of very, very difficult decisions. It's a lot of money. This year we were able to close the gap around $3 million, and still look for another $600,000. To come up with $8 million does mean decisions, and it's decisions around what we're required to make to support, and then it's not enough time to go write grants. I mean, all those kinds of things. If it's the X falls very, very fast. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention. There's a lot of advocacy going on. Hopefully, this is not just an elimination in one fell swoop. That maybe some smarter minds will prevail in terms of maybe looking to see how the Department of Education supports states and what can that mean. But it would be devastating for school districts like Binghamton, who depend highly on the support of title funding for interventions for students that we're serving.
Are there any questions that I can answer on this?
I thanked Cynthia before she came tonight because this is what used to be called the doom and gloom presentation. When COVID came, we had stimulus money, and there was no real doom and gloom in terms of being able to support some initiatives and some recovery from that. Unfortunately, now we're enough years out that we're back into a different foundation aid formula, and there's still some continued advocacy while they change the poverty marker for us, which did advocate for us by changing the enrollment number to be the real enrollment number was pretty devastating, as well as they really haven't done, in my opinion, enough in terms of looking at what the density of poverty does into a school district, as well as supporting special education students or E&L students and all the costs that are associated with that the formula doesn't address. So I know there's a lot of advocacy going on next weekend up at Capitol Hill. Thank you, Cynthia.
Sure.
And we'll just move right into Jennifer, Dr. Dove. While she's getting that presentation, it's really more of an overview of where we are right now with the budget, and Cynthia kind of set that up for us. We will be utilizing we have been utilizing the same methodology. And the philosophy in terms of looking at our budget is not to eliminate programs, right? It's very hard once you eliminate a program to bring a program back. But if we have to look at programs differently or decrease where that program is, how the program is going to be delivered, is one of our objectives. Most importantly, we make sure that our budget and everything we're putting into it aligns to our district mission and vision and our commitments to academic excellence, creating a supportive environment both physically, emotionally, making sure the student experience not only in the classroom, but the extracurricular opportunities are also there, and that we're providing a safe environment for our students and faculty and families. Again, while maintaining and enhancing in some ways. That might sound counterintuitive. We have to make these cuts, how are we enhancing? We have an amazing faculty and staff and families that help us realize opportunities in times like this, and also think of that long-term planning, what can be sustained. So it might meet the need now, but can it be sustained long-term? And then that will result in proposing to the board a fiscally sound budget for this coming year, and one that, again, we're committed to sustaining. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Dove, who's going to lead us through the rest of the presentation.
Okay. So just to build on what Cynthia shared, some of our expenses that we're projecting for next year, increasing costs for health insurance, being self-insured for our actives and our retirees brings volatility. but that's increasing about 7%. Medicare Advantage plan for Medicare eligible retirees is another increasing cost. We're looking at the increase of transportation costs that Cynthia talked about, trying to budget an increase in the number of bus runs to match needs, while also knowing that there's a 25% increase, a one-year cost that will then gradually increase after that. We have contractual salary obligations per employee contracts. In a district this size, personnel is one of our biggest expenses. And then special education and alternative education costs, again, will be going up. So other considerations. So based on the executive proposal, foundation aid would increase approximately 2.64% for Binghamton, so that's a little bit above the guaranteed 2%. The tax levy limit, right now it's just a placeholder at 3.26, as Dr. Thompson shared that in March, we'll be presenting how the tax levy calculations are put together, looking at 10-year data, and then asking the board to make a decision on what tax levy we would like to go out with. Our expense-driven aids will drive a minimal increase in revenue. And declining enrollment is another factor that we are seriously considering. Our enrollment has been declining over the past several years, about 100 students a year. So we are examining class sizes to make reductions where possible, again, without eliminating programming. So not increasing class sizes, but looking at certain places across the district where there just happens to be a really exceptionally small size. And again, we're looking at attrition through retirements so that when all possible, the positions that we're reducing are not impacting people losing their jobs. This is a review of the budget presentation that we did in January, the roundtable for explaining the budget process and trying to get input from community members around what should we be considering as we build the budget for next year. So you can see the number of participants, the number of thoughts. These were some of the emerging themes that came out of the survey. The bigger the word, the more common the thought was in the survey. Again, transportation, very important. School security, positive culture in the building, programs and initiatives that lead to high academic achievement and rigorous instruction, and offering more sports, more than sports, for after-school activities, providing that whole, well-rounded opportunity experience for our students. So again, the survey, the themes that emerged: maintaining quality teachers and administrators, ensuring student and staff safety, working for better playgrounds, more funding for extracurricular, addressing learning styles, increasing academic rigor, increasing diverse programming, increasing support for special education, early intervention, family engagement. So as Dr. Thompson said, we're committed to maintaining a full program and many enriching opportunities for students as we look to figure out where we can be fiscally smart and make reductions without impacting programming. So just to look ahead, at the March board meeting, we'll have the three-part budget, which consists of administrative, which is about 11 to 13% of the total budget, program, which is 74 to 76% of the total budget, and then the capital components of the budget, which is about 14 to 16% of the total budget. So just the timeline: March 18th, we'll have another draft. I have a draft actually of the budget for the board to give feedback on. April 15th, a more final draft of the budget. The budget hearing will be on May 6th. And then the actual budget vote for the public will be on May 20th. there any questions?
I just had a couple, but now I totally forgot one, so.
Okay.
I know it's probably a little more next week, but when you talked about, attrition through retirements, or is it keeping the same? Because I'm thinking about the whole like school of choice and opportunities and whatever. Are we keeping all the same, like coaches, reading specialists, math interventionists, all that, all those people?
Right, so we're looking at making reductions where if a class size might be, let's say 9, like if there were 3 class sections in a grade level and they're 9, 9, and 9, we might not need 3 sections because they're exceptionally small. We are looking at shifting services to BOCES whenever possible, so we can still have the service, but we can get the aid back to increase our revenue by running things through BOCES.
So what services would be shifted?
So we're gonna go through all that list next month, in March. But so we talk about services like coaching services. So for example, we have a tremendous teaching staff, and we have a lot, as we look at our educators and administrators and they begin to retire, they often will say, you know, I'd like to give a little back and do something. And they're leaving with such tremendous expertise in teaching and learning. So Jennifer and I, we approached BOCES and said, could you create a position for the title as an instructional support specialist, thank you. And so that when people retire through BOCES, they can be hired and come back and coach our teachers. And that way they can dictate their own amount of time that they want to give back. We can also have their expertise realized within the classroom, which is really tremendous. So we have, at one time, we had a large number of instructional coaches. We're down to 1 next year. We're still committed to coaching, right, our teachers and support them in the classroom and our administrators. So that's a way in which we could do that. And for Binghamton, we have an aid ratio of 80%. So if every dollar we put into that, we get 80% back the following year. So when you talk about the efficiency of trying to, you know, provide the supports in a way that they continue, but also be really cognizant that I believe we're one of the few districts in the area even offers coaching with our own staff. And many districts are now accessing BOCES through, so we have instructional support for IT, utilizing instruction through that venue, restorative practices, moving some of those resources through BOCES and being able to having that come into our classroom. We have math interventionists in place, math mentors rather, but it's not during the day, that's after the day, we can maintain that. But if we get their training through BOCES, then their stipends can run through BOCES and we get the aid back on that. So we're trying to be very strategic to utilize the resources and still maintain our own employees, but at the same time maintain that level of support. So we've tried very, very diligently to look at the opportunities for the retirements to see, so elementary is a little different, right? There's an elementary teacher across 7 buildings. When one retires, that opens up a slot, may not be in that particular building, but across the district. So try, as Jennifer said, to no one losing a job. Well, we've been doing this very strategically. So when Cynthia comes to us and says, well, you know, you could commit or try to cut between 3 and 5 million, I say, well, how much can we try to adjust right now and not impact the livelihood of our employees? Because we've got next year to look at, and there will be more retirements in the coming years. So all of that takes a lot of planning and those positions and how that's all kind of really just summarize what you're going to be presenting in next March. But does that help, Liza? That's the question.
Yeah, and I'll ask the rest of the questions next week. Although the only thing, I don't know the math or the total number. So only 137 people responded, which seems low, right?
Yeah,
out of a pool of what? Or what is our, like what's that percentage or what is the pool of possible people to respond?
So it is lower than we've had in past years. In past years, we've had around 200 responses, 250 responses from that particular survey. We've continued to push it out. It just closed, I think, February 18th. So we have principals doing it through the Remind app. We do it through our own PR, public relations. which goes into email. Reminder will go typically to a text to a family's inbox.
So this is like 5%?
What percent of our,
Yeah, or how big is the pool? I don't.
all parents, all families,
All
it's
families,
yeah.
which is like how many?
4,500.
4,500.
Well, 4,500 students, so probably families wise, it's a little less.
Right, 4,500. All right, thank
Probably
you.
more like 30. 2,000.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is looking at a third read of revised policies 6550, leaves of absence, and 7220, graduation requirements. These policies would be adopted when we vote on the G resolutions later tonight. As you recall from the previous two meetings where these policies came up, very minor revisions, much more so on 6550, just had some changed language regarding lactation, and 7220 is changing just because of the anticipated changes coming from the state with respect to graduation requirements. Are there any comments or questions on either of these two policies that are up for third read and adoption tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to the second read of new policy 7224, virtual instruction, and 7470, student government. These basically are new policies with language coming from Erie 1, essentially codifying things that we're doing already. Virtual instruction is already part of what we do, just now we'll have a policy on it. Same thing for student government. We'll have a policy on that. Student government has existed in the district for quite a very long time. Any questions on the second read policies, 7224 and or 7470? Okay, with that, we'll move on to an update on the guidance program with our superintendent and Mary Gear-Penna.
I am completely giving the floor over to Mary Gear, our incredible department chair for guidance. And we have a commitment to be reviewing our guidance plan each year. And Mary has just done an absolutely incredible job, not only leading the department, but really thinking thoughtfully around what do our students need for counseling and guidance for career development in the future, but also really thinking about pathways. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary to share.
Good evening. Thank you for having me today. So for the new board members, the reason that we present the annual school counseling plan every year is back in 2019, there was a commissioner's regulation that required all school districts to prepare a school counseling plan every year and then revise it and review it with the board annually. So this is why I'm here tonight talking with you. The purpose of the school counseling plan was to maximize opportunities for academic, social, emotional, and career engagement for all students at all grade levels, and to emphasize the positive effects that school counselors in collaboration with colleagues, families, and community partners have on student achievement to support the whole child. So we had two focus areas this year for updating our counseling plan. The first one was that we wanted to look at other school districts' plans and see what parts we liked from that we could adopt into our own. So some of the districts that we looked at were Vestal, Janesville, DeWitt, Utica, and Schenectady. We took some of our favorite parts from those plans and incorporated into ours. And one of the primary things we did is in our old plan, we had all of our programs and services in a Word document. We transferred it over to an Excel spreadsheet so that we could sort by different domains. So we added 3 columns to that spreadsheet, and the first is the domain. So we identified whether our program or service was academic, social, emotional, or career. We also incorporated the American School Counselor Association Mindset Behavior Standards, which I'll show in the next slide. So we mapped those standards to the programs and services that we're offering. And then we also added a column to the very right, if you look at the plan, of the district priorities. So we're mapping our programs and services to instructional excellence, supportive environment, student experience, and safety. This is the American School Counselor Student Standards, the mindset standards and behavior standards. They're broken out into 2 categories, and those are listed in our actual plan. And then you will see where they're mapped in our counseling curriculum map. The second focus area was to revamp our advisory board. So in the past, the advisory board was made up of all the school counselors and social workers in the district. And we decided that we would have not so many school employees on the advisory board and more non-school employees. So we kept a counselor and a social worker from all levels, meaning an elementary, middle school, and high school. We have administrators from each level. And then this year we've added a board member. So we invited Shantae Middleton to be on the board. And we thought she would be a great addition because in addition to being a board member and a parent in the district, Shantae works for Binghamton University Talent Search. So she works with districts and school counseling departments across the area on helping students with the whole financial aid process in going to college. We've also added a parent representative, and we've added many more community partners. So we have BA Systems, UHS, BT BOCES from a work-based learning and community schools, Broome County Workforce, SUNY Broome, and the American Civic Association.
Mary, could we just ask a question? How often does do they meet? How often do you meet?
Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this is the schedule we put together for the advisory board. After the plan is approved this year, we're going to send it out to all the advisory board members. We've created a Google form for the advisory board members to comment, and we're looking for specific insight from them in their specific levels of expertise. We're going to collect that and summarize that feedback, and we're going to meet at a Zoom meeting on April 8th. We're going to review all of the feedback with the advisory board members, and then we'll reconvene next fall to go over how the feedback impacted the revisions to next year's school counseling plan. So this gives you an overview of our social emotional staffing at Binghamton City School District. And if you were at my presentation last year, you'll remember me saying that at our elementary levels, the social emotional staffing is mainly made up of social workers. We had 2 elementary counselors last year, but we actually moved one of our elementary counselors up to fill a middle school position this year. So we only have 1 school counselor at the elementary school at this time. I also wanted to show that the American School Counseling Administration, their recommended caseload is 250 students per counselor. So I wanted to break out that we really are just about right on target for our caseload numbers. And if you think that the high school is a little low, that's because one of our counselors, he's one of 8. He just does the PASS and the PALS program, so his caseload is about 70, 75, so he kind of brings the whole average down. So our actual of the other 7 are closer to the 250. So we're right in line with the standards. So some items of interest. For the past 3 years, we've really increased the interest in the attendance for our College and Career Day and our SUNY Broome's Instant Admit Days. We've also increased numbers of students taking the PSATs. Last year, I got a phone call from Joe Thazy, who's an admissions at Binghamton University, and he was so excited to let me know that we had 15 seniors accepted and going to Binghamton University, which is the most that they've ever had. So we should all be very proud of that. We've had 85 of our seniors from last year enroll at SUNY Broome. We see a much bigger shift of more kids going to school locally than going away, and part of that I think is financial. Also a big jump in the interest for both CCTE. So we currently have 48 seniors from last year graduated with CTE program certificates. We have about 70 seniors in BOCES right now. We have 92 juniors. And today we took almost 120 kids to the BOCES CTE field trip. So there's a big interest in the BOCES programs. Here's a listing of the colleges that our 2024 seniors went to. I will say that our seniors last year were top. Really great group of kids. And some of the identification of needs that we're still working on, we have a hard time getting the seniors to tell us what they're doing next year. So last year we started an exit form. It was a Google form. And we got pretty good response, but this year we're going to give it to them earlier in May than in June so we can get a more accurate response. Jim, Gill, and I have worked together and we've come up with a really great system for identifying the right students for IB career diplomas and full diploma candidates. We have a lot of seniors graduating with no plans, so we've partnered with Broome County Workforce, so they actually have office hours on Mondays. They come in to our College and Career Center and meet with kids. They do career awareness, they help them build resumes, they help them look for jobs, and not just, the part-time fast food jobs. Like, they're actually helping them look for full-time jobs that have pathways for promotions. We have identified that our crisis response team kind of needs a whole restructuring, so we're in the process of formalizing a better plan for that. We have identified that we have low numbers of students completing our pathways, so we're identifying the root causes for that and trying to come up with plans to get more kids going into the pathway programs. And we'd like to improve the integration of career education and career plans at each grade level from 6 through 12. I think that's the end. Does anybody have any questions?
I appreciate the ambitious identification of needs and how to addressing them, and I also want to honor Maria, our board member, because when you said last year's senior class was outstanding, I think she thought, well, yeah, this year's senior class is equally outstanding, right, Maria? There's a little competition between those two cohorts, I realize, but thank you, Mary. I mean, the work of pathways is something that all superintendents around the region are very interested in terms of the conversation around regionalization. And we have a couple of students going up to Shenango Forks for their battery program. We have students going to CTE. We may have students interested in accessing some of the agriculture opportunities in Owego and Windsor, and other districts that are accessing that. So I'm anxious to look at that work along with the high school guidance and the support to see what opportunities we can make available to our students.
Having the career pathways already in place is going to give us a head start as they change the graduation requirements, which will impact 9th graders that start at the high school in 2027.
Thank you, Mary. Your work is really second to none. Appreciate it.
That brings us to the next item on the agenda, an update on student performance in mathematics with Dr. Jennifer Dahl.
Okay, so I presented on the DSEP in August and maybe again in September, October. So here's an update. with a specific focus on math. So this is our first priority, our academic and instructional excellence. And again, we listed some strategies and our outcomes, our goals by June of a gap closing measure of 25% for course passing rates, and then a 10% of teachers who demonstrate high level competency. So we're going to be looking at that first goal for the math performance. And so Scout, the director of math technology, early childhood, is here to talk to us about what at the elementary level, what does our data look like and what are we doing to meet our goal. And then Monica is here as the department chair for grades 6 through 12 to talk about what does the middle school data look like and what are we doing to support at the middle school and then again at the high school.
Good evening. I'm Scout War. I'm the Director of Math, Science, Technology, and Pre-K with Binghamton City School District. So in front of you, we have some data that helps to illuminate proficiency levels at the elementary level. So as far as our DSEP goals, by June 2025, 29.5% of students will be at or above grade level in math. And by June 2025, 47% of students will meet proficiency on the New York State 3 through 8 math assessments. So below, we can focus in on all students. You can, of course, see the breakdown by building to the right. But if we look at the blue bar, that shows the proficiency of our students on the New York State math test in 2022-2023. And this would be for our 3-5 students. If you look to the light blue, that shows our 3-5 students who were proficient on the 23-24 New York State math test. And then to the right, you start to see some iReady data. In yellow, we have the iReady end of year data from 23-24. And you'll see that that does correlate to how our students performed on the New York State math test. When you see that big dip to the right in the orange, that shows our beginning of year iReady data for this school year. It is typical for that data to look low because the students are anticipated to show growth on the middle of the year diagnostic and then the end of year diagnostic. So you can see if you compare between the orange and the green bars that that growth is happening. At the elementary level, we are maintaining a focus on meeting student needs through the PLT process. Our grade level teams have spent a lot of time identifying essential standards and then unpacking those essential standards. Of course, looking at prerequisite standards that are necessary for students to meet the essentials. We are using common formative assessments in K-5 math. Those are staggered throughout the year, and those are district level common formative assessments. The common formative assessments are based largely on the essential standards. Our PLTs are then reviewing data. They're reviewing once a week in their PLTs data related to teacher-created math assessments and district-level common formative assessments.
Scout, just to interrupt you. So PLTs, professional learning teams, do you want to just describe that for the board? I know we've talked about it before, but just refresh it.
Of course. So a PLT, they were formerly known as PLCs, but it's a grade level team. So for example, 3 third grade teachers sitting down once a week together and doing this work, doing this important work around the essential standards that our students need to meet in math, for example, developing teacher-created assessments to progress monitor students' movement towards meeting those essentials, reviewing common formative assessment data, and then, of course, making instructional decisions based on that data. Where do students need reteaching? Where do students need remediation? Where do students need extension? As far as math intervention, we do have math interventionists in each building. The math interventionists do collaborate with the PLTs, so with grade level professional learning teams. And the math interventionists are really looking at how to do remediation with students that are below grade level in mathematics, what content and skills need to be backfilled so that those students can reach grade level performance. We also have in our buildings at the elementary level what is called win time, or what I need time. That is additional time during the instructional day when students are entering into small groups with classroom teachers and receiving reteaching that might be necessary to move them towards meeting essential standards. So it's really building on that Tier 1 instruction. And then for teacher support, we are always trying to support teachers in building their content knowledge, in building their knowledge around the New York State math standards. And we do that through, for example, work with our math mentors. Our math mentors deliver important professional development during the summer. We do try to front load some of that PD for the year, and then they continue to offer professional development throughout the year. We also have collaborative coaches that are working with our classroom teachers on things like Tang math lesson design, building thinking classrooms in which we are striving to make our students' thinking visible, and continuing to think about and learn about the progressions and scaffolding of mathematics skills and concepts. And this is just a little snapshot from Atlas. So this year we debuted Atlas. This is where we are housing our curriculum maps. This snapshot is particularly handy. This is from 4th grade math, and it's just a small snapshot of the unit calendar for the year. So you can see to the left the units are listed. Those are hyperlinks, so teachers can click on those units and go in for a deeper dive into the unit. And then you can see that the units are all paced, and the essential standards are also indicated in green. And this would be a little sampling from the Binghamton PLC Hub. This is where our PLT, or professional learning teams, our grade level teacher teams, are going in and recording their thinking. So they include important information about what part of the PLC process that they visited during that meeting. For example, what do we want students to know and understand? Meeting notes, a lot of that is correlated to the essential standards work that our teachers and students are doing. And then of great importance, the action plan. What steps are our teachers taking to adjust instruction to reteach or extend our students' knowledge? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Monica Stento. I'm the Math and Facts Department Chair for grades 6 through 12.
So I continue the work that they're doing in the elementary buildings into the middle school and high school. So here is our DSEP goals. By June 2025, 36.3% of the students will be on or above grade level in math. By June 2025, 47% of students will meet proficiency on the New York State grades 3 through 8 math assessment. For the middle school, it would be grades 6 through 8. So if we look at the all students 6 through 8, in the year 22-23 is the light blue bar, or the blue bar. And we see an increase in 23-24. We also use iReady in the middle school, grades 6 through 8, as they do in the elementary buildings. The end of the year of 23-24, you see that there is a comparison between the New York State assessment score and the end of year iReady scores. Beginning of the year, again, you see this dip that just shows us, the students are beginning that school year, they're beginning off, and we're looking to see that increase. In the middle of the year, 24-25, we see that increase. In the middle school, we do things very similar to what they're doing in the elementary buildings. Again, the PLT process in the middle school is grade level. We have grade level at East and grade level at West. We worked to unpack our essential standards. We use common formative assessments across the buildings. So the students in 6th grade would take the same common assessment in East and at West. We use the PLT time to review the data. West Middle School has their PLT times on Tuesdays, and East Middle School has their PLT on Thursday. And we also discuss the instructional strategies. The teachers talk collaboratively about what's working in their classroom, what's not working in those classrooms, and then I help support if there's some strategies that we can work together on. So math intervention for the middle school, we do have AIS classes. The AIS teachers have been part of the PLT team, so they also pitch in with the grade level collaboration, and they meet to identify the needs of the students, and they help support the classroom teachers. They may be providing prerequisite skills to get to grade level, or they might be doing some reteaching depending on the needs of the students. For our supports, our teachers do attend the BT BOCES professional learning communities. This next month we have the Southern Tier Math and Science Conference through BOCES, and we also have summer professional development. As in the elementary school, we use Atlas, and this is a unit calendar of the year. It shows us the time of the year that they would be teaching the materials. If you click on the link, it goes in depth more into the essential standard. Each of these are essential standards for the year, and this happens to be math 8th grade scope and sequence. This is a snippet of the essential standard chart, also from Atlas. The teachers collaborate on breaking the standard down, talking about our I can statements, talking about what resources they could use. And this is an example of 7th grade. So our DSEP goal for our Algebra 1 performance. By June 2025, 42% of all students will pass the Regents Algebra 1 exam. By June 2025, 100% of baseline data in core content subject area will see a gap closing measurement of 25% of its baseline. The baseline is 70%, the goal would be 77.5%, or 30 points times 0.25.
So June 2024, on the Algebra 1 Regents, we had 23% of our students pass. Quarter 4 average for 23-24 was 59% of the students. Quarter 1 average for 24-25 school year, 62% of the students were passing. And in quarter 2 of 24-25, 65% of the students are passing. Those are grades in the class, marking period grades. So in the high school, again, we spent a lot of time unpacking the essential standards, creating the common assessments, reviewing the data, and discussing the instructional strategies. That all happens on Wednesday morning at the high school in their PLT teams. The teams at the high school are based upon the courses that they teach. So all of the Algebra 1 teachers will collaborate, all of the geometry teachers will collaborate, and they're based upon their courses. For intervention, for Algebra 1, we have an Algebra Lab, which is a second class that a student takes. It's designed to help the student improve their understanding of the essential Algebra 1 concepts. We also have an Algebra Seminar. This is a daily review class leading up to the Algebra 1 exam. For the teacher supports, again, they attend the BT BOCES Professional Learning Communities, our Southern Tier Math and Science Conference, and Summer Professional Development. And I wanted to share this. Our Algebra 1 teachers have started to use standard-based grading. So this is a mastery map. The student's IDs identify the student, and it goes standard by standard and lets the student know what they scored on a scale of 1 to 4. 3 is proficiency, 4 is above proficiency. The students receive rubrics to give them an example of what a 1, 2, 3, and 4 looks like in that standard. They also get the opportunity to retest in that standard. This is also very helpful in the Algebra Lab because the student can pull up their map and decide which standard they're going to be focusing on for that week. They can have reteach opportunities. We also have resources like Get More Math and Delta Math to help the students with that standard, and they also have the opportunity to reteach in the Algebra Lab. And again, this is an example of a scope and sequence from Atlas. Our teachers have been working very hard to get these standards broken down and for them to understand a lot about what's happening in the curriculum. So this is an example of an Algebra 1 data conversation. The teachers will identify their standard for the question. They'll also identify the percentage of students that got the answer correct. They will also talk about their celebrations. What do we notice with our students? And then we answer our critical questions 3 and 4. What happens if our students don't understand the standard? And what happens if our students do understand the standards? And they have conversations about strategies that they've used in their class. They have conversations about what more they can do for the students to help with that standard. So this is an example of what we would do during a PLT after our common formative assessment.
There we go.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for the presentation and the amount of detail you put into this. In many of our cities in our country right now, students, particularly high school, are having massive problems with addressing problems that have multi-step issues to the solution. Could you talk to us a little bit about showing students their work, how they're thinking when they problem solve, perhaps not getting the answer, but perhaps their thought process and how they attack the problem, and showing their work, particularly on the Regents?
So there's two strategies that we have been working on. One of them is the scaffolding, the question. So a lot of times we find students, especially on the Part 2 questions in the regions and in the New York State assessment, they get overwhelmed. It's the end. It's a large problem. So the teachers have started scaffolding that problem. So we look at just the first part of the problem. We have conversations, students work on that problem. Then the next day, or maybe 2 days later, we'll bring the second part of the problem. And then the last part of the problem. And then on the last day, we look at the problem as a whole. And then we introduce a problem similar to that to see how the students have used that scaffolding method to help them. One of the other things that Scout mentioned that we are also using in the high school is building thinking classroom. This is getting the students up. This is having them having conversations with students in building thinking classrooms. There are vertical boards around the room. Students are randomly put into groups and given a question, and it's students' time to look at and have conversations with their classmates about how can we address this problem? What are some things that you notice? And the teacher is more of a guidance. Hey, you know, I see you're heading in this direction in this problem. I see someone over here doing something similar. What can you learn from them? So we're trying to get them to also start communicating with their classmates. What do I know? What do you know? How can we put it together to solve this problem? So that is two of the strategies that I see most frequently used.
I just had, is there a number or percentage at elementary and middle of how many kids are receiving intervention?
So at the elementary, we have tier 2 and tier 3 intervention. So just about all of our students are receiving tier 2 intervention, and we're using win time where students are broken up into small groups depending on what the common formative assessments are showing that they need. So we're breaking them into smaller differentiated groups. And then the math interventionists, there's 1 or 1.5 in buildings that are also providing even higher level intervention for students, as Scott was saying, really hitting previous grade level skills for those that need that level of support. And then at the middle school, we have intervention teachers, so students are scheduled to classes to have additional support in prerequisite skills in previous years.
Okay, so for like the number of kids that the interventionists
So it's
are
pretty
working
high
with.
number. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from the goals, from looking at the iReady middle of the year to the goal for the state test, like elementary is about 30% away and middle school is about 20% away. So is that, I don't know, reachable or close or probably not? Or is there any adjusting going on or?
Tony, you want to speak?
Yeah, I'll let them talk about the adjustments and how they're adjusting the instruction, but one of the questions that I've asked Scout and Jennifer on a high level is to look at the assessment tools that we're using as strong indicators, right, of the students' goal or attainment of mathematical knowledge. And how does it align to state assessment performance? And so if you look at a district level, district number, there's actually a fairly large alignment to end of the year iReady and state test performance, which is, you know, kind of almost like you want to see, because when we look at the beginning of the year, right, it's rather low. And I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. However, we have to also understand what the iReady assessment is supposed to be doing, which is more of a diagnostic and deep dive into what are the gaps of their knowledge for that grade level's curriculum. So we have been having more conversations around, is that the right assessment to be utilizing to say, okay, like group assignment, from all that. And I've asked them also to look more carefully into the fidelity of using iReady. iReady in many school districts not only uses the diagnostic component of that program, but also the standards component of that program. So I'm wondering mine is, would we be benefiting by having some other component? Like, is it one of those programs where you have to have the whole package? You can't just pick off the show a piece of it. to be utilizing. Although we are doing essential standards work with our common frequent assessments. So, that's just a question that we've had at the table. I'll let them speak to how that assessment data falls into play with the support for students.
So the iReady diagnostic is very helpful because it will pinpoint the strategies where the students have a deficit. And they actually do have activities and lessons and reteaching abilities right there within iReady. So often our AIS teachers in the middle school are using the iReady lessons. They can group their students according to which standards their deficit and how many grade levels. Is it 1 grade level or is it 2 grade level? The teachers can also assign lessons based upon those needs, or they can assign lessons that are what the students are working on in their classroom, depending on the needs of the students. And the students often have conferences with the teachers to talk about what growth they're seeing, or if they're not seeing growth, what can we do to help support you with that growth. So we are using iReady, some of their lessons and the information from iReady quite frequently in the middle school.
This might be for Scout or Jennifer, but because 3rd grade, this is the first time for the tests they're on computers, or did they take that last year here on the computer?
So, 3rd grade is the
oh,
first year
it's
that
the
they
first
take
year
the
period.
state test.
Never mind, yeah.
We do have
So-
them dabbling with some computer-based
Okay.
testing in 2nd grade. Like partway through the year, we start to transition them to some computer-based testing just to give them some of that experience.
And then what are they doing like this year or now? Is there support the
In
kids
3rd
are getting for that in 3rd grade?
Right, so.
Yes, absolutely. So the district level common formative assessments, our 3rd grade students are taking those on the computer. So they're learning how to interact with the math tools that they would use also on the New York State math test. So they are gaining very valuable and practical experience throughout the school year. Absolutely.
Thank you.
When you say lessons in iReady, are concepts first being taught by the teachers and then iReady is like a support, like they're just like completing assignments, or are like they learning exclusively through iReady?
No, they provide support, so they can lead the teacher into what kind of strategy can you use to help support the student with this particular standard. They notice in this standard the student is struggling with, let's say in proportions, the student is struggling with identifying an equivalent ratio. So it might bring you down to a 4th grade standard where they're talking about equivalent ratios, so the teacher can help the student with that concept and then relate it back to what they're doing in their class.
But they still are having like classroom.
Yes,
lessons.
yes.
Okay.
This is extra support for the student.
Sorry, I just want to clarify.
Nope,
what you were
that's okay.
explaining.
I'll just add that math as a topic of support and looking at instruction is something on every superintendent's radar. As a matter of fact, it's a group that all the assistant superintendents and superintendents have been meeting on a regular basis around math instruction, trying to learn and figure out opportunities to collaborate across our region, because at one point in this region, math performance was above the state average, and we're not there yet. So we're asking ourselves, what are we missing? Is it the support as a region for math instruction? Is it resources? Is it, what is it? So we're planning administratively, as a matter of fact, next week. Every year I do with all of the administrators what I call a problem of practice, where we talk about a particular kind of struggle or area that we're all focusing on, and what can we learn from each other around through leadership. And so we're going to kind of look at some data and do a problem of practice around how to support teachers' instruction around mathematics. That allows us to look at all the tools that we have that were mentioned tonight and kind of pull it all together. Which is the feedback from the administrators is they really appreciate that time, because it's real problems, right? We are talking about what we're working with now and how we can be supportive of one another's understanding of that. the last year's, if I could pull out Algebra 1, our students' performance was far from stellar, but it was far from stellar across the state. So, you know, I was just looking at the difference. We could see where we are from BOCES, like what percentage we are in terms of overall proficiency. Those proficiencies were actually not that far off of state BOCES as opposed to previous years, but far more students weren't successful. So it's kind of an interesting conundrum in terms of, is it a test construct? Is it the way they're asking questions? Is it Common Core algebra? What is it? And the other thing I would mention is that the state's looking at, you know, they're not looking at eliminating the regions, but rather they're looking at pathways and to what degree do you have to pass certain regions. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in each content area and what the state's going to be looking for evidence of attainment of mathematical knowledge. That's to come.
Next up in special reports, first read of revised policies, 6560, determination of employee status, and 7223, advanced coursework. These are revisions that are made necessary because of changes in state education law. And somewhat related to this, there would be a recommendation to rescind policy 6561, professional service providers. Much of the language in this policy, 6561, is contained within 6560, so there's really very little point to have both. So we're recommending that 6561 be stricken from the policy handbook. Are there any questions on 6560, 7223, or 6561? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and this will be to discuss the current vacancy here on the Board of Education. And so Tim Ames had resigned effective December 31st of 2024 because the following day he was sworn into the Broome County Legislature, which he was elected to back in November. So we're at 6 board members, and at full strength we're at 7. So there was a memo sent around over the weekend to help guide the discussion on how the vacancy should be handled. Before I go any further into this, I should point out, as stated in the memo, as a small city school district, we are not obligated to fill this vacancy, and I'll discuss the options that we have in just a little bit here, and definitely want to give time for everybody to weigh in. So in the last 10 years, this situation has come up 6 times. There were several occasions where we did not choose to fill the vacancy. Basically, it was a function of timing. So by the time that this discussion item came before the board, there was very little time between that and the next election. So the board felt, for the most part, not unanimously recalling those discussions, but the consensus of the board was that there wasn't much point in appointing someone to the board to fill 4 or 5 months or so worth of time until the next election. That wasn't really going to be to anyone's best interest. There were several occasions where, as you probably had seen in the memo, that the board had chosen to fill the position. One of those was pretty recently with Paul White, where he had finished second in the election. We had a resignation that was dated after the election, and so we brought him in, and that was for an entire year. And he had chose to run again and subsequently was not elected. When Tom Scanlon had resigned, the board had voted to appoint John Weaver. He had previously served on the board. It was a time of a superintendent search process, so they felt he had unique skill set and perspectives to help them in that process. And one other time was noted here where Joe Gager was appointed in July, and again, that was to fill an entire year. They had quite a lot of time to fill based on when that resignation had come in. So just to recap the 3 options that we have available to us, one is we can leave the seat vacant. And so here it is, it's February 25th, the next election is May 20th. So we can talk about whether or not that's an appealing option to us. We can choose to appoint a qualified person. And certainly one route that we can take, and it would take a majority of the board, 4 members, even though it's 6 the magic number to hit would be 4 because it's considered a quorum with the full 7 members. In fact, that would be necessary for any of these options. And the other is that we have a special election, and we can have our philosophical discussion about whether or not that's a good idea, given that the next election is going to be in less than 3 months. And so we need to choose one of the 3. And so with that, just open it up to anybody that wants to weigh in, and everybody has a turn.
With the time that we have until the next election, I think, in my personal opinion, I think it would be best to wait for the candidates that are interested in running for the board and not appoint anyone at this time.
I concur with Shantae. The clock is against us really, and it just doesn't make sense to have someone come in with a short duration like that. What would be accomplished, by the time they did settle in, unless they were interested in running, for the full seat. So I would again agree that we just leave it vacant.
I'm always uncomfortable with appointing, and I don't like it using money for a special election, so I prefer, like, Shantae and Dr. Penna said, to just wait the 3 months.
I'll make it a clean sweep. I'm definitely in favor of leaving the seat vacant, and I've had this question before me a couple of times, and there were 2 times I chose to leave it vacant, and the timeline we're following was longer than what we have here. So it would come up in one time in January, the other in maybe November, December, and I felt like there was a little point in getting somebody onboarded, pun intended, and by the time they really, if it was somebody who had not previously served, by the time they really feel like they know what they're doing, it's time to say goodbye to them if they're not ultimately elected. So I didn't really think that was productive, and I would think it was even less so with not even 3 months until like the next board and budget election. A special election is almost never chosen. You have the same costs and the same effort and time put into that as with a regular election. So I've never seen that done once in the time I've been part of the scene. And I'm not really generally in favor of appointing a person unless they've run before, like I voted to do that last time around with Paul, and it was filling an entire year, so there were those 2 things. Mostly the time horizon for me is the big thing, but given all the circumstances we have here in front of us, I feel the same as the rest of you, that we'll go ahead and leave the seat vacant. So it brings us to the next public comment portion of the meeting. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? Okay, that was easy. We'll move on to the big handshake note from Kevin. So we'll move on to approving the superintendent's recommendations on certified C resolutions. Could I have a motion on C1 through C8, please? Moved by Shantae, seconded by Liza. And Albert, could you please read C1 for me, the first paragraph?
Whereas Tina Christina Price has served the Binghamton City School District faithfully and continuously since September 14, 2018 as a dance instructor, and whereas Tina Christina Price has submitted their intention to retire effective at the end of the day on March 31, 2025.
Thank you. Go ahead and read C2, retirement, Edlin Dutton, whereas Edlin Dutton has served the Binghamton City School District faithfully and continuously since September 3rd, 2019 as a math teacher, and whereas Edlin Dutton has submitted their intention to retire effective at the end of the day, June 30th, 2025, now therefore be resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education does and hereby accepts their request for retirement. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education extends to both of these individuals our sincere thanks and extends our sincere best wishes for long, happy, and prosperous retirements. And with that, we can proceed to a roll call vote.
Ms. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms. Middleton?
Yes.
Dr. Penna?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mrs. Button? Yes. Mr. Silversville?
Yes. Next up, certified stipend CS resolutions. Could I have a motion on resolutions CS1 through CS3, please? Moved by Liza, seconded by Carrie. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yeah.
Mrs. Button? Yes. Mr. Seebersville?
Yes. Non-certified NC resolutions, could I have a motion please on resolutions NC 1 through NC 7? Moved by Shante, seconded by Liza, and could we have a roll call vote please?
Ms. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms. Middleton?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mrs. Button? Yes. Mr. Seebersville?
Yes. And general G resolutions, could I have a motion please on resolutions G1 through G11? Moved by Carrie, seconded by Albert, and with that, can we have a roll call vote please?
Ms. Callahan?
Yes.
Ms. Middleton?
Yes.
Dr. Bennett?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mrs. Button? Yes. Mr. Seebersville?
Yes. And that brings us to updates from the superintendent.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Just a couple of celebrations I want to bring to the board's attention. On March 9th, we're going to have both our boys and girls participating in boys and basketball sectionals, which is phenomenal. I forgot to ask your mom if it's going to be able to be on YouTube or not. But if it is and you're not able to attend, just really, really tremendous. They are not only spectacular to watch on the court, but they are just genuinely incredible young people, both on and off the court. So it's really a pleasure. We also have our upcoming musical, March 7th, 8th, and 9th at Binghamton High School. It's Mamma Mia. We put on incredible shows. Things I'm always astonished by, I'll go, and some student will be up there singing and dancing and acting on it. Where did this person come from? We have talent that goes, sometimes in smaller school districts, it's that group that comes through that's great every single year. Somebody just knocks it out of the ballpark. So I want to thank our public relations, who has been doing a great job supporting the arts and kind of trying to do it behind the scenes, showing the production as it evolves. Those things are just great to watch and to have out there on social media. And I also wanted to bring a very busy weekend. The 9th is the sectionals, the 8th is Odyssey of the Mind. I will be sending to the board that Friday before they run the full schedule. If you know what Odyssey of the Mind is, a tremendous extracurricular opportunity where students are given a team of 7 are given a problem to solve creatively. Sometimes those problems are ones that they act out and they have to use certain elements in their creation of the production. They have to create everything their own. So you see a lot of cardboard in the hallways that's painted, moving in and out of scenery. And there's also a balsa wood building structure where they can solve a problem, build a structure, and they put weight on it, and they see which one weighs the most. That's combined with spontaneous, where they walk into a room and they have 3 minutes to either answer a verbal problem or a verbal hands-on or just a hands-on problem. So if you look at the schedule and see, oh, there's a team, maybe from a building that you support or represent, you can see when you can go in and just see what OM involves. It's really tremendous. I don't know if your children have ever been involved in OM. I was a coach a long time ago. It's really fantastic. So I'll make sure that schedule gets out to the board. And I also wanted to just celebrate and give a shout out to our faculty and staff on the many events that are happening throughout the district in celebration of Black History Month. It seems like there's a little bit more of interviewing alum and individuals who had an impact within our community, which is wonderful to see. And I also wanted to just end with the call out to respond to Sonia around board development sessions. So we are talking with Steve at the agenda meeting to move forward with 2 more sessions for the purpose of preparing to look at student enrollment in Roosevelt and looking at the students where they're going to move in and out during the time, and then where students will result after students are moving off the Roosevelt campus for the new build. So I know one suggestion was either the 11th or 12th. It seems like some people aren't able to make that time. We would like to try to get the majority of the board. If not, I'm going to put out there, I know this is difficult, but perhaps before the board meeting on the 18th, that we kept that time a little bit smaller. That purpose of that first meeting is really to talk about what we learned the last time with Sean Eversley-Bradwell around establishing our objectives, looking at a draft of a timeline, communication plan, kind of setting it up for success. And then that second meeting, we're could invite Sean back to kind of go through at a more granular level a plan and get some additional insight into how that would, what that would look like. I'm also thrilled to share that we were able to find a program, a very reasonable price software program where you can input addresses and demographics to see where our students are living throughout our community. So very visual, and so I'm optimistic. I know I have enrollment data, but I'll also be able to have some visuals for that first meeting to kind of begin to look at and be thinking about how we want to move forward. So if you have an RSVP with Sun, she'll be after you, you know. She'll call you and text you. I appreciate your support. I think that's it.
Our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 18th, and we'll have school recognition for Woodrow Wilson. As mentioned earlier in the meeting tonight, we'll have the draft 3-part budget to examine, an update from the DEI committee, and an update about the Patriot Ambassador program. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Carrie, seconded by Albert. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.